We've got a great guest for you guys now. Senator Gary Hart. He is, of course, former senator from Colorado, served between 1975 and 1987. He ran part of George McGovern's campaign in 1972. He's now the Worth Chair Professor at the University of Colorado, Distinguished Fellow at the New American Foundation, member on the Council of Foreign Relations. He was co-chair of the U.S. Commission on National Security for the 21st century. I think you get it. Now, Senator Hart, welcome to the Young Turks.
It's a pleasure. I'm exhausted.
Now, you know, the funny thing is I left out while we're talking to you, he's also the author now of The Thunder and the Sunshine, 4 Seasons in a Burnished Life. So let's start at the beginning, Senator Hart. First, how'd you get into politics?
Well, I was of that generation that was motivated by John Kennedy and later by Robert Kennedy to give something back to our country. I was born of working-class parents in the Midwest and did not have political aspirations or any background at all, but I did respond as a student in 1960 and beyond to the idea of public service, and one thing led to another.
And you worked on the McGovern campaign. My former co-host, Ben Mankiewicz, his dad is Frank Mankiewicz.
That is exactly right, and Frank and I worked very closely together on that campaign. I knew the Mankiewicz boys when they were quite young.
Yeah, good folks, the Mankiewicz folks.
They really are. It's a distinguished family.
Now, unfortunately, the lesson that a lot of people took away from that McGovern campaign was, well, you can't be too liberal, right? And that's kind of haunted the Democratic Party for all these years. Now, I don't agree with that lesson, but what was the lesson you learned from the campaign, and do you think people have misinterpreted it?
Well, first of all, I spoke at a bookstore in Boulder last night, and I started out by saying I have to recognize that no one under 40 knows who I am, and everyone over 40 thinks I'm dead. So I have to perhaps qualify myself to your listeners to explain George McGovern ran for president against great odds in 1972, 71-72, against the incumbent president, Richard Nixon. He lost badly, but it was one of the pivotal periods in American history. All of the revolutions of the 60s were going on, the social revolutions, the anti-war protest, the emergence of women's rights, the emergence of civil rights, the environmental movement. It was a very it was a period of upheaval, even in some ways a social revolution. And he was the Democratic candidate for president in that period. He has been, most of the wise pundits in Washington have said his campaign was a disaster. I argue in this book and before that campaign helped keep the Democratic Party together.
Well, why is that? Why do you think that?
Well, it was up to, I'll go even farther back. In 1968, there really was a chaotic convention in Chicago. Your listeners can go back into history and find out all about that. There was literally blood in the streets in Chicago. And going forward, looking to the next election, the Democratic Party was threatened with blowing itself wide open because it was a closed system dominated by a handful of big city bosses, and they would not let young people, women, minorities, war protesters, and others into the position of power. And so George McGovern led the effort to reform the party and open it up, and it was those reforms that kept the party together.
So, and those are very different times in other ways, too. You know, Richard Nixon wound up beating McGovern, but Nixon, you know, obviously was terribly conservative in many ways, but by today's context would be seen as quite a liberal, having created the Environmental Protection Agency, among other agencies. And we have, it seems, an enormous shift to the right in our political spectrum. First, am I seeing that right? Do you see the same thing I'm seeing?
No, you are absolutely right. In fact, it's gone in stages. Today, I wouldn't say that Richard Nixon would be a liberal. He'd be a moderate Republican, but all of them are gone. And I document in the book the senators I served with in the 70s when I was very young, and they were all towering figures, particularly compared to today, and many of them were moderate Republicans, but they're all gone. They were replaced by the Dan Quayle generation in the Reagan years, and now the Quayle generation, which I thought was very conservative, is being replaced by people even farther to the right.
So let's talk about what you think might have pushed this spectrum in the way that it has. When we're talking to Senator Gary Hart, he was, of course, senator from Colorado, ran for president, and he wrote the book, The Thunder and the Sunshine, 4 Seasons and a Burnished Life. So, you know, I've talked to Ralph Nader in the past on this program and outside of it. He thinks there was a big sea change in around 1978 to 1980 when Democratic Party started getting more corporate money involved, et cetera. Now, because remember in the 70s, as you were a senator back then, at least through 75 on, you're getting a lot accomplished. You know, OSHA's formed, EPA's formed, a lot of regulation that winds up protecting the American consumer and the American public, and all of a sudden there's a change. What do you think precipitated that change?
Well, for several factors. I think the cost of campaigning escalated dramatically, and the lobbyists began to play a much greater role, a power role in Washington. Then you had the advent of advocacy journalism in the form of Fox News and Rupert Murdoch. You began to have whole networks dedicated to conservative causes, and of course talk radio, led by Mr. Limbaugh and others, and a hammering 24/7 about the government being evil and Democrats being evil, and that went on and on. In the meantime, you had 3 Democratic presidencies, one Jimmy Carter for 1 term, Bill Clinton for 2 terms, now Barack Obama. Contrary to what the right says, these are not lefty figures. These are moderate centrist people. In fact, Bill Clinton made a almost fetish out of his centrism and triangulation and avoidance of going to the left, and carried out welfare reform and a whole bunch of things like that a lot of people thought were kind of conservative, deregulation of the financial industries, and a variety of things like that. So all of this rhetoric now that you hear on Fox and you hear on Limbaugh about Obama being a socialist, it's just patent nonsense.
No question. Earlier in the program, we played a clip of Glenn Beck talking about how everyone in the, not everyone, but almost everyone in the administration is a Marxist.
Marxist. It's just nonsense.
It's madness. But I'm trying to figure out the cause to see whether we can reverse it, right? Given where we are now, and given that the state of the media in Washington is so diluted that they're taking people like Glenn Beck seriously, and it seems that they're not seeing what we're seeing, this enormous shift to the right in the country, not in terms of the people, not in terms of the population, but in terms of Washington, right, and the political parties.
Well, I think that's right, and it's Arianna Huffington, among others, in her Third World America, talks about the destruction of the middle class. Now, what happens is that doesn't make people right-wing; it makes them angry, and the Tea Party takes advantage of that anger and coalesces it against the government. Now, there's a lot wrong in Washington, and I'd be one of the first to say it. It's a totally different place than it was when I had the opportunity to serve there, and we did get things done, and people had confidence in the government. But it is now captured by the lobbying industry and the special interests in America, and they are squeezing the life out of the middle class. And that means that doesn't mean the middle class is moving to the right. It just means they're very, very, very unhappy, and with good cause.
Senator Hart, how do we fight back? Because, look, you've got Fox News not only doing what they do on their air, but they seem to infect the rest of the media into thinking these are like things like the so-called Ground Zero Mosque is a real story, and that there's a real controversy, and they distract people with that. And so they've got this overwhelming power. Today, the Weekly Standard made up a story about how the Obama administration was going into the Koch brothers' tax records. It's not true, but they just made it up, and now everybody's talking about it. You know, they've got that power, and they've got the power of the lobbyists, which are, you know, has honestly infected the Democratic Party to a very large degree, but totally taken over the Republican Party. How do you fight back against all of that?
I think the president has to lead the way, and I have been a defender of his and will continue to be, because I think he's doing his very best. But I think he does have to come to speak more often and say pretty much what you've just been saying. He has to explain to people why the situation exists. Now, there is an erosion of confidence in him because there was so much confidence that when he went in there in January of 2009, that he would clean house and straighten things out. And I'm afraid, for a variety of reasons, he got sold on the necessity of populating his administration with people from previous administrations, Democratic ones, instead of bringing in a whole new team. and that has hurt a great deal.
So I wrote about that today. I talked about it earlier today on the show. I got a blog up on Huffington Post about it. I can't figure out why Barack Obama, who ran on change, loves the establishment so much. I mean, the four guys he picked, Larry Summers, Tim Geithner, Rahm Emanuel, Peter Orszag, who was his, budget director, you can't get any more establishment than those guys. And now their possible replacements are a guy named Jacob Lew, who worked at Citigroup and thinks that deregulation didn't cause the economic collapse. It looks like he's going to replace Summers with another corporate executive because Fox yelled at him and told him he was anti-business. I mean, how do we get the president to actually do what he said he was going to do instead of running to the establishment at every opportunity?
Well, if I could answer that question, I'd probably get the Nobel Peace Prize. It's not just those handful of people you mentioned. Up and down the defense establishment, the Defense Department, the National Security Establishment, the State Department, and many of the other agencies at the Deputy Secretary, Undersecretary, Assistant Secretary level, these are veterans of the Clinton administration, many of them highly qualified people. But that was then, this is now. That was a different world, even though it was 10, 15 years ago. It's a totally different world, and I think he should have brought in, as much as possible, totally new people.
Well, unfortunately, he hasn't so far. We'll see. We always hold that hope.
He'll have another chance.
Yes, we will. We'll see how it goes. Now, to come back to your book here, I want to get a sense, but at the end of, writing the book, and the book's called The Thunder and the Sunshine, 4 Seasons and a Burnished Life. Senator Hart, what are the lessons you take away? I mean, from things that happen positive, the negative things that happen, et cetera.
Well, I would, in an effort to boil it down very as succinctly as possible, say, first of all, respect our Constitution. This country's gotten in trouble every time we skirted the Constitution, and we did that under Nixon, we did that under Lyndon Johnson, we've done that under president after president. The worst and most recent instance was the suspension of habeas corpus during the George W. Bush years, and Democrats voted for it. Shame on them.
Hear, hear.
Second point, live up to our principles. It's very closely related to that first point. The people of the world respect us when we live up to our own high standards and principles. And we don't always do that. We've supported dictators, we've undermined foreign governments, we've spied on people, we've tried to assassinate foreign leaders. That's a violation of America's principles. Third, learn from history. This country is 220 years old. We're too old to be adolescents, and yet we continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over.
Senator Hart, you came really close to becoming president, obviously, right? And I'm curious about that, because if you had won, right, when you came into office, they would have told you, like apparently they've told every president, you have to do the spying, you have to do the assassinations, you have to do all the things that you just said we shouldn't do. Do you think you would have been able to say, no, we're not going to do that?
Absolutely, and because of the reasons in the book. My first assignment in the Senate, aside from the conventional committees, was to serve on the Church Committee that investigated the CIA. We uncovered a lot of this stuff. I learned an enormous amount about the dark side of our national security operations. I knew them top to bottom, and I knew who was involved, and I knew how they worked. And it's one of the reasons a lot of people didn't want me in the White House, I think. But in any case, no, I had 6 more years in the Senate than Barack Obama had. Those were invaluable years.
Senator Hart, finally, as we are having this conversation, I'm thinking, look, we voted for the guy who promised overwhelming change, and he got into the office, and they told him he's got to do X, Y, and Z, and he did X, Y, and Z. That's, my reading of it as I see it. We got more of the same, not any change. That leads me to think, you know what, the next time, you can't even trust the person who says they want change. I think maybe the way to tell is if the media in Washington hates a candidate, right? like Howard Dean, like, oh, he's terrible, oh, don't elect him. I think maybe that would be a great way of determining who we should vote for.
Well, he certainly would be unestablishment, anti-establishment. I talk about that in the book as well. I'd add another factor. I'd say demonstrated willingness to buck the system and try to reform it. And I offer my own 12 years there as evidence.
All right. Senator Gary Hart, the author of The Thunder and the Sunshine, 4 Seasons and a Burnished Life. Thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. We'll be right back.